Well, hello everybody, and welcome to Faster Masters Rowing Radio, where having a rowing coach only makes you better. Following a program gives you a true pathway to becoming a confident rower who's respected by your peers. You can become the athlete you want to row with. I'm Rebecca Caroe, and I'm joined by Marlene Royle.
Hello, Rebecca, and hello to our Faster Master Rowing Radio audience. Say that 5 times quickly. So very nice to be here.
It is. I've had an extremely good rowing week this week, which has been nice because we've had fabulous weather. I have this sort of late summer, early autumn here, and we just had those really lovely calm mornings and just glorious pinky sunrises.
Nice. We have nice warm. We're at 15 degrees centigrade, so we're pretty warm. You and I, we might have the same temperature, but our snow is melting fast. So once it starts melting, then I want the lake to melt really fast.
So the snow goes first, and then the lake follows.
The lake can go very quickly, so we're fingers crossed.
Now, if you're listening live, do use the comments below the live stream if you have anything to ask or tell us, or maybe where you are and where what you've been up to this week. And this week's show is sponsored by the Rowing Concierge. If you want 15 minutes just to ask your personal rowing question and to get an answer from someone who is somewhat more experienced than yourself, this is the place to come to. You go to fastermastersrowing.com/concierge and you'll see a calendar and you can book a time with us. In the concierge, or via the concierge, we have recently had a couple of really nice bits of feedback. We had a customer who is an erg rower heading into a future competition. And what they told us was, I got to the limit of my skill at designing sessions, workouts, and how to improve. And so we had a conversation with them about where they needed to take their rowing in order to achieve a goal that's in 2023. And the other one is a customer who started on our monthly program back in January the 9th. And they told us that they had diligently done everything that we'd asked. They'd read every article, they'd watched every video, they tried to do every workout to the best of their ability. And they said, people around the club had kind of noticed that I was working hard. And the club had a little race this past weekend during which they handicapped the results so that, single sculls could race against eights and quads and so on. And this person won. And she said everyone was blown away because there was a well-established crew of people who have won national titles who got beaten by them. And she said people really noticed. And that was just in probably 8 weeks training. That amount of change had happened. But, credit to a really diligent athlete who worked really, really hard, and high fives from us. And the photo they shared of us, the smile was ear to ear with this medal, our stripy ribbon.
That's fantastic. And that shows that paying attention, being aware of what you're doing, maybe being sharper about how you change your stroke rates or working on part of your race. All these small things make a difference to build your confidence when it comes to race day. So, that's incredible progress in eight weeks. But, obviously she was on it.
Totally on it. I just want to share the photograph that I have. And this is at the Heineken Regatta in Amsterdam. And the photo came from Ingrid Terwurst. And what she said was, we are wearing blue and yellow in solidarity with Ukraine. And the full photo is actually on Masters Rowing International Facebook group, if anybody wants to go and have a little look. Now, this past week, this is the part of the show where we talk about the work we're doing to advocate more generally for Masters Rowing. What have you been up to?
Well, actually, the beginning of the week has been fairly busy. Here at Faster Masters, we had the Aging Well webinar on Tuesday. And that was quite interesting with Claire Del Mar and Hugh Dunstan and Rebecca and myself. Really, I just, the product is up on our website. It's recorded, so if somebody would like to listen to it again, they can access that. But that was a very, very interesting discussion, and I encourage people to listen to that. So that was what we were focusing on at the beginning of the week. And one of my own little personal master's projects, being a great advocate for masters rowing and making sure that I pay attention and take care of our masters at my rowing club. I spent some time this week contacting all the people who do regular coaching sessions and getting their feedback about where they want to take their rowing this season. What's most important to you? What's the next step? What types of coaching sessions would you like? What are you interested in? Because for those of you who organize programs, each year your population of masters is going to be a little bit different. And if you had a number of new people who did learn to row or started the previous season, their goals this year are going to be a little bit different. And maybe your third year people are now going to start, what came out of this was, oh, well, we'd like to get some actual training sessions in now. We want to work on technique, but there's some people starting to be interested in racing because, again, my club is very, very new. So, you can see how year to year, how that develops. But I think it's a good thing for program coordinators to ask one or two pointed questions and then say, and do you have other suggestions? Because that's where you'll get some of your best ideas. And, you try to find a balance of how you can meet the needs of your masters at your club.
Brilliant. I love that. And I hope you're getting some really good feedback from the people, who want to be in your program this year.
I think the big thing was that people very much appreciated that they were being asked. That was something that was very, very obvious, that, oh, you're so, thank you so much for asking even me, like someone who, and I was like, what do you mean? You were one of the most regular people coming to the coaching session. So I think just the fact, I think it's good that people know that you care and you want to know about your opinion. You may not be able to do everything for everybody, but to aim for a good balance.
That's really important. And I had an article published this week in the British Rowing membership area. So if you are in the UK and you have access to plus.britishrowing.org, you can find it. It's on goals and measuring training for masters. And they have very kindly removed the gate so that non-members can read it at the moment. So if anyone's interested in that, please feel free. So we have, as usual, one of our very special regular guests, Jess di Carlo. Welcome to the Faster Masters Rowing Radio again.
Thank you. Thanks.
Jess is our correspondent who talks about Book of the Month, and she's been doing some reading.
Yep. So this being Women's History Month in the US, I picked, and I have to show it on my phone. It's My Olympic Life by Anita DeFrantz. So I don't have a, but I think I might get one of those too. But anyway, it was written in 2017, so pretty recent book. She was the captain of the first U.S. women's rowing team in 1976 in Montreal. And she was in the 8. I forget how many events there were, but a handful of them. I'm sure Marlene and Rebecca might know, but they won the bronze medal. And I couldn't remember until I read that they did win a medal. And so I thought I'd read a little bit from that. So that first race on July 18th, 1976 at the Olympic Games in Montreal did not turn out as we had hoped. But the 8 of us, plus our coxswain, who are racing together for the first, which I can't even believe, had worked hard to win a seat in the boat on the first U.S. women's Olympic rowing team. Somehow we pulled together and recovered in the next two races to win the bronze medal. And she went on to say that this reality that people of every shape and color and both sexes could live and work together peacefully no longer just a dream. I began to believe that if these ideals could work for 4 weeks, then perhaps they could make them work forever. And today in 1976, I have been at the center of the Olympic movement. And that kind of sets the tone for the whole book. I mean, she talked about the rowing a little bit, the selection process, her introduction to the sport in college, Connecticut College, I believe. She was athletic, and her family were activists. Her grandfather even was an activist in the late 18, or her great grandfather, late 1800s, early 1900s. But she has gone on to become a member of the International Olympic Committee, which is very prestigious. And she was the first African American member. And she was elected in 1986 and was one of the youngest ever elected at 34 years old. So, just looking back, reading her history, it was clear that she had that desire to stand up, to make sure that everybody's voice was heard. And it was so great to read it. I mean, there's a lot in there about the International Olympic Committee, the IOC, and I learned a lot about international rowing and just everything she's done to make sure that women especially receive parity. And in 2016 in Rio, that was actually the first Olympics, I believe, the first Olympic Games where women's rowing was had equal events to men's rowing events.
That's correct.
And
Yep.
I can't believe it took that long, but there we are. And fighting behind the scenes for that and for other similar things. And it's just, I'm really glad I read it.
Clearly an inspiration.
Yeah, very much. And I'm very grateful to her and
there
to a lot of other women.
There were 6 women's events at the Montreal Olympics: single, double and quad, coxless pair, coxed 4 and 8. And there were men had single, double, quad, coxless pair, coxed 4, coxless 4, coxed 4 and 8. So a couple more events.
And in 1980, the year with the boycott, Anita made the 8 in 1980, and Holly Hatton was the coxswain, and Holly Hatton was my coach at Boston University. And the two of them were the leaders in the rowing group, really working to try to overcome the boycott so that they could race at the Moscow Olympics. And Anita may have been a lawyer already at that point in time, but her and Holly, they tried to do everything to get individual permission so that they could go, because, for example, in Britain, even though officially Britain boycotted the 1980 Olympics, athletes were allowed to self-fund and go compete. That's why Sebastian Coe was able to run in the Moscow Olympics.
Martin Cross too.
But in the US, that didn't happen. But, Anita was one of those. Anita and Holly were kind of the driving activists of that movement. And they really, really tried to overcome that boycott so that the team could go race self-funded, but it just didn't happen.
They did everything. And I wanted to talk about it badly, but I mean, I couldn't talk about everything, but she told the story of that in great detail. And it was so inspiring. And she didn't say that she's glad it happened, of course, but she learned a lot from that. And just, you could see why she's still doing those sorts of things. And she was the one to speak, or one of the ones to speak up. And it just, there was a part where she testified, I believe, or gave TV interviews about it, because she was one of the vocal supporter or organizers of the effort to still go. And I mean, it was just stunning what she did.
Well, thank you, Jess. That's absolutely great. And if anyone's interested in rowing books, there is a blog post on Faster Masters called Best Rowing Books. And you can find it quite easily. Just search for rowing books on our website, and they've got all sorts of inspirational books in there. Now, our big topic for this week is the start of a series of about the stroke cycle. We thought we would work our way around the whole stroke cycle over time. It's going to take us some time. And we're going to kick off by talking about two really important things: balance and stability. And Marlene, I'd like you to start by explaining, what do you mean and what is the difference between those two things?
In my rowing world, no, I'm kidding. Balance and stability. This is how I look at balance and stability. I view balance as something relatively narrow, and I view stability as a wider base of support. So in terms of the boat balance, I think of balance as within the hull, relatively narrow. For example, you're sitting on the seat, might be your weight on the seat, you're sitting on the seat, your pressure on your feet, you're working in this a narrow range. When we bring this out to stability, I think of stability of the whole boat and the whole system. So when I think of stability, I think more about the boat oarlock to oarlock, and keeping, is your boat stable in terms of when you take your blades out of the water? Are you able to keep your rigger and your boat relatively level and stable? But stability also implies where your body weight is to some degree. So making sure that you're keeping the connection to your oarlock, and you're keeping the connection of your body weight and your core stability, connecting yourself to the whole system of the boat. So I would view stability from a more holistic point of view of the boat, the body, and the blades working together.
I love that. And one of the things as a coach, you develop an eye for looking at athletes. You look at how people row. And I was remarking to someone on the bank the other day, as somebody else rowed past, that although their boat was balanced, they did not have stability. And the way I could tell that was particularly when the oars are out of the water. They were not handling the oars in a manner that led me to believe that the downward pressure on the handle that they had put was sufficient to maintain the integrity of the whole system. And you can actually see that. And it's sometimes easier to see in beginners. They'll often run their blades along the surface of the water, or be a little bit conservative when the oars are out of the water, because they are uncertain about their ability to hold the boat level. And of course, they want the boat to be level. And you can see there's a little circle of thought and action and reaction that sits around there.
One very easy way also, if you're looking at someone who you see, oh, they're having trouble with their balance, they don't look that stable. Oftentimes, if you video and you come up on someone's stern and you're looking at them over the stern towards them, and you look at the release, you will almost always see their collar moving away from the oarlock. And the fact that that weight, we'll see that the fact that collar at the release pulls away from the oarlock a little bit means that you're pulling your weight off that side of the boat. If you don't have that collar against the oarlock, your weight is coming off that side, and you're going to fall to the other side. So, making sure that you stay, I call it staying on the path of the handle, or stay on your arcs. So, as you're swinging around in sweep rowing, we talk a lot about working around the rigger and staying on that pivot. you have to maintain that pivot as you approach the release, because if you start to pull like on an erg, your collar is going to come away from the boat.
Yeah.
It's going to come away from the oarlock, and you'll often see that reflected in a lack of stability when that happens, because the weight's unequal on both sides of the rigger.
One of the things that I enjoy, we have to steer around a few corners where I row, and I enjoy teaching people how little you often need to do to keep the boat balanced while steering. It's quite hard to do. And in sculling, it can be done just with your thumbs on the end of the blade. You just put a tiny bit of lateral pressure on both sides. Or if it's a particularly tight corner, you might just say, just put more pressure on one side than the other. And you can bring the boat back to balance very, very easily. And in sweep, it's the same idea. Your inside hand pushes sideways to keep the collar against the oarlock, and it has a very similar effect.
And if somebody's transitioning to the water from winter training on the erg right now, I think one of the best things you can do if you get into your single, or you get into a 4 or an 8, doesn't matter what the boat class is, if you all sit with your blade at the release with your blades squared in the water at the finish position, and simply practice what Rebecca just said. But you can think of it from the tip of the handle, you can think of it from pressing a little bit from your lat, but if you just press against the oarlock on one side without changing your handles, your boat's going to tip to one side or the other. So keeping that equal pressure on both sides is a big factor to keep your boat stable. And very subtle motions can help you keep the boat level. And this is particularly important on the recovery when your blades are out of the water, and your blades are out of the water 2/3 of the stroke cycle. So what happens when your blades are out of the water is quite important.
Beyond quite important. Personally, I get very frustrated when the boat's not balanced.
Well, and if you're going to learn how to row in rough water, you need that balance and stability, so that if you need to carry your oars a little bit higher off the water, you're able to do that. So, I call it watching your weight. Watching your weight in the boat makes a big difference, but little subtle changes against the oarlock make a big difference in keeping you connected to the boat as well.
If you're interested in rowing in rough water, we have a podcast and an article about that on the blog. Just go search for it. Let's talk stability now, because one of the things that a skillful athlete can do in a rowing boat is they can turn tricks. They can do all sorts of fun things. And the reason they can do fun things like pulling the oars into the finish and then tapping down and away and then pulling them back into the finish, and then like a double finish, and doing squaring twice on the recovery, or rowing square blades, or rowing one blade square and the other feather, So these are all fun things to do, usually with a purpose in mind, not simply for showing off. But once you have stability in the whole boat system, you can do all sorts of things with your oars. So, Marlene, talk us through the principles of how to acquire the skill of stability.
I think first you have to practice drills. Absolutely. And one of my go-to favorite fundamental drills is a stability drill that you do in place. I'll describe it in a single, but you can also do this in a pair, in a 4, in an 8, a quad. It doesn't matter. But basically, if you start at your finished position with the blade squared in the water, initially start to practice just a release, and we just mean tapping down so the bottom edge of the blade comes out and then goes back down in the water. Then you go to release and feather, and then release, feather, hands away. Now this sounds very simple. However, the goal is to execute these movements, these new patterns, without the boat tipping from side to side. So you need to be able to remain stable when you're making that transition from the water to the release. Now the blades are out of the water. So you've got two different support systems here. When the blades are in the water, the blades are supporting your body weight to a large degree. Now you have to transition that the blades are no longer supporting your body weight. And where do you want your body weight to go? On the seat? Or you want to try to distribute some of that on the rigger and stay light on the seat. So first, just patterning, being able to go release, feather, arms away. When you can go release, feather, arms away, body away, and then back down in, you haven't even taken a stroke yet, without the boat tipping, you have developed the pattern and the skill, and that is going to integrate right into your rowing. And you will be able to start rowing with your blades off the water in rough water, because you've developed that pattern for transitioning from the water to the release. And it's a very difficult drill in a racing single. And sometimes when people start this at the beginning of the season, I said, okay, well, this will take you all season. And they think I'm joking. And, but the important thing is start each stage, every little bit that gets better goes right into your stroke. So you benefit from that drill immediately. But, you have to commit to those patterns. You have to commit to learning how to keep the boat stable when you are taking the oars out of the water and not losing that transition, because that's where most people will tend to go off balance, will either be right when they take the oars out of the water, or when they take the oars out of the water and then they let the blade fall back down to the water. So once you take the blade out of the water, you have to keep it out of the water. So that's one drill. There are other drills, but that's one that you could do even in cold water, not going very far from your dock.
I think the key concept behind that drill and everything we've talked about today about balance and stability is understanding what the weight in the hand feels like when the oars are out of the water. So when the oars are in the water, you're powering through your feet, and you should be feeling your feet, and your hands are just hooks. They're not doing much in terms of the handle. But when the oars are out of the water, the concept of that downward pressure in the palm of your hand, you can see where all my little calluses are here. So it's not up here in your fingers so much. It's down at the base of your fingers where they join into the palm of your hand. And being able to have downward pressure on the hand so that you can actually feel the control of the height of the handle, and the actual mass, the weight of the blade is entirely controlled. Marlene's demonstrating it beautifully.
Yeah. So here, this is where Rebecca was showing at the base of your fingers here. If you've got some weight of the hands here, you can really relax your fingers quite a bit and move the handle and keep some weight over the handle so that you can keep the blades off the water. And the key is when you take the blades out, maintain the weight over the hands so that the blade stays off the water.
Absolutely. And it's very hard to teach because the athlete has to have enough confidence to try it. And one way of helping people to learn what the feel of it means is another drill that is called open palm sculling. And you do it like this. You get to the finish, you take the oars out of the water, you feather, and then as you're rolling up the slide, you extend your fingers and your thumb so that the oar handle is just sitting very sweetly, simply underneath your hand, and it just sits there. And then you roll your fingers back when it comes time to square the blade and take the next stroke. And while you have your open palm, your hands are flat, you need to feel a small amount of downward pressure. Otherwise, your oars will drop down and the blades will run along the surface of the water. So if you don't have enough room to square, as in you have to push down to square because you haven't got enough room or else you touch the water, that's your test.
Absolutely. I think that is one of my favorite all-time drills. And I think if I were going to pick a drill that often helps the light bulb go off for people, it's the open fingers drill. And what Rebecca said about keeping enough weight over the handles is really important. So my question would be, how do you know you have enough weight over the handle? What I use as a reference point is I will ask our rowers, put weight over the handle when you feel like you just set up a little bit taller, then you know you've got enough weight in the handle. So that is one little secret industry trick to setting your posture in the boat. So as your hands come away and you put that little bit of weight over the handle, you're going to feel your sternum comes up. So you sit tall in the boat. That's your signal that you've got enough weight over the handle. If you don't have enough weight over the handle, you're probably going to be kind of slumping down on your butt in the seat. And you want to think about being up and over the handles, just like what Rebecca was talking about. But this is something, if our listeners are sitting at a table right now, put your hands on the tabletop, just with your hands flat. Put your hands on the tabletop, and now just press down slightly, and you'll feel like, you sit up a little bit taller. You don't have to press down that much, but just press down a little bit. It's going to raise your sternum. It engages your lats. It raises your sternum. So that's your key to set your posture. So those two things work very, very well together. If you don't feel that, you probably don't have enough weight over your hands.
And to be clear, the weight in your hand has got nothing to do with how high the oar is above the water. This is a different feeling. I also like you to have your oars higher above the water than Marlene coaches, but this is quite different. So I hope everybody is now sitting at their tables. And
yes. But if you don't have that feeling, you can't carry your blades high enough, and you need to get that height off the water by the time your seat starts moving. By the time you're moving on your slide, you've got to have that height off the water. Otherwise, you won't have the room to square up. And that's another discussion for us on another day. But
which is why it's called the stroke cycle, and we're going to be cycling our way through the whole blooming lot of it. So that brings us quietly to the end of our podcast. If you have enjoyed what we've talked about today, would you consider making a small regular donation? If you go to fastermastersrowing.com/podcast, donations start from $1 a month, and we are extremely grateful to everybody who supports us in this way. And we have some little gifts we have given in the past and some new ones that we'll be giving in the future. Secrets only between us and the people who are kind enough to support the podcast, and to say that they are finding that there are really, really useful things that they're learning as a result of Marlene and me sharing what we know about rowing.
Mustang. No, don't leave.
We'll be back next week. Actually, I lie. Next week, Marlene is hosting a solo show. So there are some surprises coming. And
we'll have to get Mustang back on. He's a phenomenal chef and avid rowing competitor. And he knows how to whip up some really good stuff in the kitchen.
There's a promise for the future. And thank you to Jess di Carlo and her lovely Book of the Month review, which I shall enjoy reading that myself, because it isn't one that I already have on my personal rowing bookshelf. So thank you to you, Jess, for joining us, and Jess will be joining us next month as well. This has been Faster Masters Rowing Radio, the show where everything is all about masters athletes who want fun, fitness, and confidence in their rowing. You can become a student of the sport by buying a Faster Masters Rowing Program subscription today at fastermastersrowing.com/join. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Bye.